When you think of Switzerland, it's likely the visions of chocolate, pointy mountains, timepieces, and an army brandishing tiny little multi-tools come to mind. One thing you're less likely to think of is a semi-legendary phantom roaming the idyllic trails and woodland of the Swiss countryside. Yet for a period of around 10 years or so, back in the early 2000s, the people of the sleepy village of Maules became wary of an imposing, silent figure seen lurking in the woods close to their community. Wearing an old Russian-style gas mask and a camouflage poncho from head to ankles, this tall bogeyman-type apparition became known as Loyon. The most well-known reported sighting of Loyon comes from 2012, though some would say much earlier. On a Sunday afternoon, Marianne Declue from the village of Maules decided to take a walk in the woods that was situated close to the village. For local people, the woods had been an enjoyable and safe place to take a long stroll with family, their dogs, or just by themselves. The website alltrails.com rates the area 4.5 stars out of 5 for the nice, easy-to-navigate trails and camping. Overall, it sounds like a lovely place to be. But for Declue, her outlook on the local area was about to change drastically. Walking through the drizzly woods on a trail she knew well, she was suddenly startled by the sight of a crouched figure just ahead of her. Difficult to see at first, thanks to the camouflage cloak that it wore, the figure eventually stood and turned towards her. She could see the figure was well over 6 foot and its cape-like poncho trailed almost to the floor. Underneath the poncho, it wore a dark-coloured boiler suit, the ankles of which were tucked into its boots. In its hand were flowers it had been picking from the side of the trail. Most terrifying of all, however, was the grey rubber gas mask that covered its entire head. Even though the mask had 2 round eye holes that hid the eyes in shadow, she knew this entity was staring right at her. She would later say of her encounter, "It was a rainy Sunday. He had a cap, a dark cloak, and his gas mask. What could possibly have been going through his head? I don't know. But it was unforgettable and unpleasant. I hope I don't run into him again." Several encounters have been reported to authorities, including children running from the phantom in fear. Police carried out several low-key searches of the area. Officers were keen not to create a panic or encourage vigilantes to take up the search. They did state publicly that they wanted to speak to the figure known locally as Loyon, but only to discourage his activities, as he hadn't actually broken any laws. However, after more than a decade of regular sightings, local people adjusted to the presence of Loyon. They gave him or her plenty of distance, as Loyon did with them. It seems like they wanted to live in isolation, and given how unnerving their appearance was, most people would honour those wishes. Then, in August 2013, for the first time, Loyon was photographed by an amateur photographer, and the photograph was published in newspaper Le Matin. As on every other occasion, Loyon seemed uncomfortable at being seen, and without offering any aggression at all, the figure simply turned away and wandered into the woods. The photographer managed one snap of Loyon peacefully leaving. According to an article in Daily Mail in September 2013, which also carried the photograph, there have been a number of theories as to the figure's true identity: a mentally ill woman, a gigantic man, or someone suffering from a nasty skin condition. Others suggested that Loyon has deliberately chosen a hermit's life, perhaps because he is a survivalist obsessed with the apocalypse. After the photograph began to go viral, the story took a sudden and potentially very dark turn. Le Matin reported that the cloak and gas mask worn by Loyon had been discovered neatly placed in the woodlands he or she had once extensively roamed. With the items was a handwritten note that began, "The death certificate and testament of the ghost of Maules." The article said in the note, Loyon was aware of the photograph and the attention the image was bringing to the forest, clearly a place they found special, even sacred. And with that, as suddenly as they began, the sightings abruptly stopped. Perhaps whoever was under the mask had laid the Loyon persona to rest. Or perhaps, sadly, they had indeed taken their own life once they had placed their death certificate in the woods to be found. Though no one has ever come up with a suggestion as to who the semi-mythical presence actually was, and despite all of the theories, Loyon is perhaps never meant to be identified. Theirs is an almost tragic tale of someone who enjoyed the quiet, natural woodland, but who chose an appearance that encouraged others to leave them be, but also terrified witnesses to the point that they treated the masked spectre as a scourge. Loyon didn't seem to find the isolation they craved in the forest around Maules. Perhaps maybe, once the mask and cloak were retired, they moved on somewhere new and found the peace that they were looking for.